I'm M. Sauter, better known as Pints and Panels.
And I'm Don Tse, better known as the Don of Beer.
Welcome to the 14th episode of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And if you're feeling generous or nice, visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. This week on the show, we've got a very important topic, freshness. We have two awesome guests, Erika Goedrich of the Craft Beer Cellar in DC and John Kimmich of The Alchemist, who will talk about freshness from two perspectives, getting your beer to market and then how it's sold. Don, fresh is best. I'm the type of person that's like looking under cartons of Best Buy. I want Born On. I want transparency. I want to make sure that I'm getting the best beer possible. I know that's neurotic, but I've been burned by old beer before and it stinks.
Getting burned stinks or the old beer stinks?
Both things stink.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's I think that's your prerogative. I'm I think a little bit less neurotic. Obviously, fresher is generally speaking better, but I'm such a nerd that I have my own little beer cellar, and a couple weeks ago I had an IPA that was like 12 years old, and of course it did not taste great, but I'm such a nerd that I actually...
Why did you have a 12-year-old? What is wrong with you?
It got to the back of the cellar and it was hard to reach.
Oh, a likely excuse.
So, anyways, I'm such a nerd. I actually enjoyed it on an academic level, but I do. That's a whole side thing. Obviously, fresher is better.
Do you look at can dates when you buy beer?
Not when I buy it. I will look
at
it. No, because again, I'm kind of happy.
You look at it at home and then regret.
No, I don't regret it, because even if I'm getting it out of date, I still enjoy it. At that level. And I think beer changes, and I think that's a good thing. Like, I don't think.
I agree. I'm thinking of a time I bought a 12-pack of beer at a supermarket. It had a date on it that was kind of a mystery. It was an insider distributor code. And when I opened one of those beers, it tasted like I was drinking a swimming pool. Oh. And it was disgusting. And I have no idea how old that beer was. And it definitely does not taste like a swimming pool most of the time. So I was shocked at how bad it was. And I said, never again. And we foisted them on my brother-in-law. Even he was like, I'll drink these regrettably. So...
I'm the type of guy, if I bought a 12-pack, I deliberately drink one each month just to see how it changes over the 12 months.
More swimming pool. Excellent. Delicious.
Now it tastes like Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll introduce our guest and get into a conversation. But first, if you would like to support the All About Beer podcast, reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com.
Attention all managers and team leaders. Do you want to provide your staff with the best training in the beer industry? Look no further than Beer Savvy Online by the Cicerone Certification Program. In just a few hours, your team will master the fundamentals of excellent beer service, styles, and beer flavor. At the end of the course, your team can earn a globally recognized beer industry credential. And the best part, as a manager, you can monitor your team's learning progress. Set your business apart with a beer savvy staff today. To learn more, visit cicerone.org and click on the group training button. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can get your company or message featured on this show and others produced by All About Beer, please reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com. Thanks again to Cicerone for sponsoring this episode.
Erika Goedrich is the owner of the Craft Beer Cellar in Washington, D.C., and the co-owner of Mindful Drinking Fest. Welcome to the show, Erika.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So what do you do at the Craft Beer Cellar? And your store is based in Washington, D.C., correct?
That is correct. Near Union Station. I am the owner of Craft Beer Cellar, and so a jack of all trades.
Oh, nice. So you're in charge of essentially everything from, the minute beer comes in to beer being out of code to ordering to all that stuff, correct?
That is absolutely correct. I am very hands-on here all the time. So
wonderful.
Yes.
It's always nice to see a beer store owner be very hands-on. I think that goes for something for the quality, and shows that you care about beer. So
Definitely.
That's
I mean,
very, very, yeah, very nice. I want you to walk me through what happens the minute beer comes in. So beer gets delivered. Is it cold? Is it warm? Depending on who delivers it. And then how do you input things? How do you make sure that freshness is on top of your mind when beer is delivered?
sure. So it depends on the distributor, where it's coming from, if the beer is delivered cold or warm, and whether the trucks are refrigerated or not. And then when they bring it in, we're checking the date codes on them. If anything has less than 30 days of shelf life left, I immediately send it back. I don't even accept that case or cases. And then we follow a first in, first out method when we are putting it on the shelf. So the newest stuff in goes to the back. We're also checking just to make sure. It can happen sometimes when distributors deliver that it can be within code, but it's older than something that we have on the shelf. So we try to keep an eye on that as well. It doesn't happen very frequently, and usually there's not a big difference in the dates, but it can happen. And so we try to pay attention to that. Another thing that I do is I don't order large like I'm not ordering 25 cases of IPA X. I order 1 or 2 at a time to get me through the week until next week's delivery. And so I'm trying to always make sure I'm getting the freshest beer that the distributor has, who should also be following the first in, first out method.
And most distributors deliver weekly or bi-weekly, or
most are weekly.
okay. What percentage would you say are delivered cold versus warm?
During the winter, I would say it's more just room temperature.
Okay.
It's not cold, but it's less of a concern. During the summertime, more, I would say about 50% of it is delivered cold.
Okay.
Which you can tell because it starts sweating.
Right.
Yeah.
But of course our entire store is not a cooler. It's a store. We do keep it 68 degrees to try to that's about as cold as the HVAC guys will let me go here, but I think that's acceptable in terms of the temperature of trying to keep it in the range that it needs to be. So
How do you monitor like fresh, like Born On or Best Buy? Is it just eyes on? Is there a spreadsheet? Is there, because there's, I mean, I can imagine a beer store nowadays, you must have, I don't even know how many SKUs.
yeah, I've lost track too, I would say 500 to 600 at
Wow. Okay.
but yes, it's tough. I mean, and every situation is different. So sadly, there are some breweries who don't even put a date code on their cans or bottles. For those, I try to basically, I'm not ordering them unless they're on the new sheet from the distributor, because I have no idea how old that is. Like, was it from the first time that beer was sent in, or have they gotten a replenishment shipment and it's newer? And so I know there's no guarantee that if it's on the new sheet that it's 2 weeks old or a month old at that point. I just have to kind of press the I believe button that the brewery is sending the freshest stuff, the distributor's putting it out there as soon as possible, and we're going with that. And it's something that I just, because I am here all the time and do the ordering and have a keen sense of what's what, have knowledge of, okay, this has been here now for a month. I need to, kind of push through this, whether it's, discounting the price or recommending it to people, et cetera. So it's not really an issue moving through it. It's just knowing, okay, is this within code or not, or when was it canned, or what is the best by date. In situations where breweries do put a date on there, then you have to figure out, okay, is this the canned or bottled date, or is this the best by date? Some people but both. I'll give an example. Boulevard is great. They will put both the born on or the canned on date as well as the freshest or best by date on there. And so there's no guesswork that needs to be applied to that, because if somebody puts the canned on date, then it's like, okay, so what is the brewer's intention? Is this 90 days? Is it 120 days? Is it 180 days? And shortly after I opened, I did have a spreadsheet where I was trying to keep track of, okay, what is this? And some breweries make it easy because they're like, all our products are 120 days. Now, one could argue you can't apply that sort of method. Like a barrel-aged stout has a lot more shelf life than 120 days, but at least you have guidelines to go by, versus otherwise you're kind of, it's kind of a crapshoot and guessing, okay, what did the brewer intend? And it is difficult to reach out with, how many breweries do we have in the US now? 9,000, 10,000. And granted, no, we don't carry all of those, but still reaching out to the ones that we have, to every single one, and trying to track what their date methods are, is a difficult thing to do. And then you spread that out over the number of beers. And so then I back it up to, okay, IPAs, you give them a 90 to 120 day shelf life. If it's a West Coast IPA, you can give a little bit longer. And the thing to keep in mind is, unlike milk or some other products, like if you drink beer past its best by date, it's not going to make you sick. It's just that the flavor falls off, the hop profile falls off. And so it's like, if it's 1 day past code, is it the biggest deal? No, it's not going to make somebody sick, but it's not something that you want in your store. And we're not perfect. Things have slipped by me. We do everything is available to sell as singles or to buy as singles here. And so sometimes, you're moving through the 6-pack, but there's a single that's sitting there, that's been sitting there forever, that nobody's bought in a while. And you don't realize that, oh, that one's, moved past code now. So you do the best that you can. Of course, there's also the difference in dating methods. Is it month, day, year? The Germans especially love to do day, month, year. Some breweries do Julian dating, in which you have to figure out, okay, 365 means December 31st versus, 1 means January 1st, and trying to figure that out. So yes, it's something that I wish the brewing industry was better at, that there was some consistency, that everybody dated, that all breweries dated their packages, but we do the best that we can.
Yeah, because some have like coding. Are you privy to the insider coding that some larger breweries, I mean, I don't know what you carry, but I know some larger breweries will have distributor only codes, or that they know, distributors know, but the public doesn't, which infuriates the heck out of me.
Yeah.
I try to buy beer.
Yes, usually I don't have access to those.
Okay.
I have worked with some of our distributors here locally, like that they send me, I don't know, every 2 weeks, basically, a list of their products and when they're coding out and stuff. And that's to help so that I'm not ordering something that's close to code and they have to bring it in the door and then I just have to send it back. And so it's to help both of us, but that way, then I wouldn't say that's necessarily insider information. It's just sharing the date codes that they have with me so that I know what to order or what to stay away from.
So wait, hold on. All right, go ahead, Don.
I was just gonna say, I'm a pretty cynical guy.
What? Come on now.
So I was wondering if, and this is my dark side coming out, but I mean, like, if a brewery is hiding information by using date codes, emphasis on the word code, where it's not obvious what they're doing, are they trying to hide something? Like, should I read into that I can't assume freshness, because otherwise they would just put a date I can actually read and understand on it?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay. Well, that hasn't been your experience then.
No, I can't say that I deal too much with people who are putting random secret codes on things, or maybe it drives me crazy, the breweries that will put a witty saying on the bottom of a can but not a date.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, maybe that witty saying is their internal code. I don't know. I also don't know. I don't know what it costs to buy the dating machine that you use. And so why doesn't every brewery have one of these? I don't understand why breweries aren't dating.
Yeah, I mean, you could even you could do a best, like a born on with a grocery printer. I've seen that with really small. That's a little difficult when you break it into singles versus 4-packs. But I've seen smaller breweries do that, and that's a date code. Okay, I know what that is.
Yes. Or, I mean, some people used to, I haven't seen it recently, but they would at least put a date on the case box. I at least had that to go by. I know that for the end consumer, it doesn't do any good, because depending where you're shopping, you have no idea. It's something that I know I place a lot of value in, and I hope my customers know that I do that. So, but you can't trust that everywhere. And so I just wish there were consistency. I wish everybody was dating. I'll give you a situation too, from a customer standpoint, it's tough for them as well. I had someone email me in a week after having shopped here, saying, hey, my boyfriend and I were in last week and we bought 6 random singles and they're all out of date. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can see maybe one of them, but like 6 different beers being out of date, that's really like, oh no. And so I was like, thank you for reaching out. Do you remember the names of the beers, etc., so that I can look into this, remove any from my shelves, willing to give you a refund, all that stuff. Well, as it turns out, all of them were canned on dates, and they were fresh, like from 2 weeks prior. And so, but if the consumer doesn't know, then they're confused and thinking it's expired and thinking and then they're not going to buy your product again. So I don't know.
It's a super sticky situation, because I love when breweries do both, and that's great. And then there's some breweries that are like, no, I'm not going to tell you any, like I've bought 12. My big pet peeve is when you buy a 12-pack and the born on or best by date is not printed on the case.
Yep.
I'm like the person that's like moving it around to be like, all right, I know Sierra Nevada does, but there are larger breweries that don't. And I'm just not going to buy it if I don't know if it doesn't have a date on it. I'm that person in like the milk, area, looking at trying to find the freshest milk, because I'm that person. But yeah, no, it can be incredibly confusing. Would you rather everyone do Best Buy or Born On? Do you have I feel like yours would be Best Buy. But...
Mine would be Best Buy, although it's funny because I have had customers tell me in the past that they should be able to decide when it's best. Like they may like something that's 110 days, not 90 days. The taste of it better. And
so ideally it would be both. They put the Born On and Best Buy. Yeah.
Ideally it would be both. And I'm of the opinion, like, it's the brewer's product. They should know what its shelf life and best by dates are based off of, and like, you want to drink the product that they put out. They're putting it out to you saying this is what it should taste like. So, but at the same time, I mean, everybody's different. And so, we also, something can be a day old and some people like it and other people think it's too green. So there's that too.
How do you educate like the people who call or email them, were like, no, these are out of date, but how do you feel like people, yourself or brewery, should educate about freshness?
I mean, in response to that email, I just explained that those were all canned on dates. They came fresh. Like I checked with the distributor and a couple of those breweries to be sure that it was the canned on date, not Best By date. And that I think it would be good, like on their, I mean, this gets into the there's so many beers, so many breweries now or they might have one or two core beers, but then they're rotating so many of their other beers. But it would be nice to put information on their website. There's ability, even if they don't have if a date coder machine is really expensive, then could they put a QR code on the label that people can scan and take you to a website? Of course, I personally would hate that. Sorry about that. I personally would hate that, because then I'd have to be scanning all day these QR codes, but at least it's information for the consumer, and I'd rather have that than nothing at all.
Sure.
Right.
I also think we need to get away from the Julian dating.
Yeah, because that feels very like 90s, like kind of a old school, like, and then you also have to do you're like, all right, 275 is like, at the top of my head, I have no idea what day that is.
Right, exactly. I either have to Google or I just do a rough in my head, like every month is 30 days, and so okay, 270 divided by 30 is 90 or is 9, so we're talking September there. Okay. Just narrow it down that way.
What do you wish customers would understand or would do when they're shopping for beer?
On the one hand, not be so picky about dates, because there are customers who will look at the date, and if it's 3 weeks old, they won't buy it. And then there's other people that I wish would pay more attention when they're shopping. Though, again, I hope that they are trusting me to do the legwork for them here at my store, but I know that that's not everywhere. So just to be knowledgeable and kind of watch out. But I mean, you know, this is what I live and breathe. I don't expect customers to know, okay, Sierra Nevada is this many days on their products versus Boulevard is this many days versus other half is this many days on their like, how do you keep all that straight? And so you know, but maybe consumers can start reaching out to their breweries and encouraging them to start providing both canned on and Best By dates.
I like that. Good advice.
What do you do when beer goes out of date? I know some breweries will do a buyback, or to get the stuff off the shelves, do you return it to the distributor? Are you in charge? Do you eat that? How does that work? What happens when beer goes out of date?
So it depends on quantity, really. So if I have a full case or something, and it's something, sometimes if there's a local rep in the market, regardless of the quantity, I'll reach out to them. And it's something where, like, I've reached out to them before it actually codes. Like, I'm really struggling to move this beer. Can we do a tasting or something to help move it along, type of thing? And so then they'll be like, hey, if this doesn't move, I'll purchase it from you. Or reaching out to the distributor if it's a full case of something, and be like, hey, we tried, but this didn't move. Because it's an infrequent request from me, and because it's not large quantities, they're often willing to, basically they'll trade out with a fresh case if they have it, or give me a refund. And then if we're talking a couple of cans, I just have to eat that cost.
Okay. Do you ever? Oh, go ahead.
Sometimes I also drink it myself to be like, or depending on how it tastes, like, okay, what's the difference here? Like, do I note the oldness, if you will,
Right.
in this versus a fresh one type of thing. So use it for education purposes too.
I guess my question on top of that was like, do you ever hold stuff specifically out of code to, age it? Or because I mean, if you're going for education purposes, but vintaging certain bottles, because some things can last, people want imperial stouts a few years old, or for selling, or verticals, or anything like that.
So if it's something that is not a barrel aged or something that can last for years, I'll hold it for a little while, like for the education purposes, but it's not something that I'm looking to like keep or having to keep track of. And then for things that are barrel aged out, something that you could do a vertical on, typically I also don't do that, just because I don't have a whole lot of space here. And so when something comes in, I mean, if somebody wants to cellar it, they can cellar it, at home. So.
Do you have, it sounds like you are very, very diligent, and I thank you for that. I'm assuming not all stores are always that diligent. I can't even speak today. Vigilant. Do you have any rules of thumbs for customers? Like, obviously if a can is covered in dust, that's old, but any other rules of thumb? Like, I guess I'm thinking like, if there's a rare beer and I see a floor stack of, 20 cases, they've overbought it in the hopes of cashing in on the cachet of that beer, and therefore it might be old. And I don't even know if that's true. That's basically what I'm asking is, do you have any rules of thumb where if you see a big floor stack that's not a good sign, or maybe it is a good sign? I don't know.
Yeah. It depends what it is. Oftentimes those floor stacks could be something like Bourbon County Stout, or
right.
So those are things that are fine to age, and so that doesn't turn me off. I would say it's more when I see stacks of IPAs around, and when I see those stacks, and admittedly it depends, maybe the store moves that volume in a week, I don't know. Right. But it concerns me that, okay, how, when their next delivery comes in of that product, are they moving that stack to the top so that the freshest stuff goes on the bottom?
So maybe consumers should go to their favorite store on delivery day to see what they do.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they move the fresh stuff to the back until the newest delivered stuff to the back until the stack up front moves, and they don't have to constantly be restacking. But it is something that I often, when I see something like that, I kind of am curious about the stack. And again, it depends. If it's something that's seasonal, like if I see a stack of Schlafly pumpkin in my store on September 1st, I'm not going to be concerned about that, because like it's seasonal and I know that's going to move, particularly something as popular as Schlafly pumpkin. But if I see that same stack there in January, then I'm concerned.
Red flags. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Don't be buying pumpkin beer in March.
Yeah, it's gonna definitely lose its pumpkin for sure.
Which is a good thing.
Hey, Don, come on now. There's nothing wrong with pumpkin beer. In its time and place, pumpkin beer is lovely.
Yes, if you need to clean your drains, it's
Oh, boo. Boo. Come on now. Don, is there anything else you want to discuss with Erika today?
No, I love it. People just need to be conscious and ask questions and think about it. And I love it. I think that's true of every aspect of beer. So I love it.
Anything
else you'd like to add, Erika?
I mean, I would just agree with Don, like use common sense. There's nothing wrong with looking at most breweries that are dating are putting the dates on the bottom of the can. That's not 100%, but that's the majority. And so it doesn't hurt to take a peek. And if you see an IPA that particularly one of the New England style IPAs that's, hovering around that 90-day mark, be a little cautious. If that's not to say every IPA has a 90-day shelf life. That's not true. And like I said, particularly the West Coast IPAs have a longer shelf life, but it doesn't hurt to take a peek at the bottom of the can and see what the date is. And if you have concerns, talk to me or whoever the attendant is at your local shop.
Exactly. Always, yeah. I'm a peeker. I peek.
Yeah.
I'm always peeking. I'm always looking for dates. Because once you get burned and you're like, man, I paid blank for this, and I'm not gonna, you could get your money back perhaps. But maybe I'm lazy. I don't know. Once you get burned by old beer, you become more vigilant to make sure that doesn't happen again, because there's nothing worse than opening something and being like, oh no, now I have 12 of these, or I have 4 of these, and then you have to like dump them, or
now they get put next to the pumpkin beer that you're going to dump.
Oh geez, Don.
I didn't realize I was supposed to stay away from pumpkin beer.
Don's just being Don.
I am. I actually like pumpkin beer. I just like to take hot takes sometimes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Erika, where can people find info about your store and you on social media or website?
All of the above. Instagram and Twitter, CBC_DC. So that's like craft beer seller, Washington, DC. CBC_DC. Website, cbcdcbeer.shop.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your insights. This was really fascinating. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It was a joy talking to you guys about Freshness.
Cool. Awesome. Cheers. We'll continue our show with John Kimmich, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Attention all managers and team leaders. Do you want to provide your staff with the best training in the beer industry? Look no further than Beer Savvy Online by the Cicerone Certification Program. In just a few hours, your team will master the fundamentals of excellent beer service, styles, and beer flavor. At the end of the course, your team can earn a globally recognized beer industry credential. And the best part, as a manager, you can monitor your team's learning progress. Set your business apart with a beer savvy staff today. To learn more, visit cicerone.org and click on the group training button. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can get your company or message featured on this show and others produced by All About Beer, please reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com. Thanks again to Cicerone for sponsoring this episode.
John Kimmich co-founded The Alchemist in 2003 with his wife, Jen. As head brewer of their company, John oversees all brewery operation, recipe development, and quality control. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Nice. Well, can you tell, for people who don't know who you are and don't know who The Alchemist is, if they live under a rock or are new to beer or are fine because, you're in Stowe, Vermont. Can you tell us a little bit about your brewery, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And on that point, you'd be surprised how many people don't know us. I still am. How often we get new customers that come into our brewery that have never heard of us. So it's funny how time marches on. But yes, my name is John Kimmich. My wife, Jen Kimmich, and I started The Alchemist as a 60-seat pub and brewery back in 2003. We're coming up on our 20th anniversary, and we now own and operate 2 production breweries, one in Waterbury, Vermont, and the other here in Stowe, Vermont. Waterbury, Vermont is strictly production, and the Stowe facility is our curbside retail, and our cafe.
Nice. So we have you on because we want to talk about Freshness, and you are known for your IPAs, Heady Topper and Focal Banger being the 2 of them. I noticed when the pandemic hit that you guys, to help out or however it was, you started distributing kind of far and afield. So I was seeing Topper, I was seeing Focal Banger where I live in Connecticut, which isn't super far from you, but I was also seeing it in, Oregon and other places. How does one with IPAs needing to be fresh, and you say that on the can and all that stuff, how do you make sure that when people drink your beers that they're getting what you intended?
All right. Well, you hit on a couple of things there. I think I'd have to back up to the
I know it's a lot.
Yeah, I think I'd have to back up to the beginning of your question. When you said at the pandemic, you started seeing our beer popping up in other markets. That is absolutely true. But what you probably didn't realize is that our beer was at times in those markets for several years before the pandemic hit. I would say pretty much right away when we opened the Stowe facility in 2016, and even a little bit before that when we only had the Waterbury facility, we started sending very small, limited amounts of our beer to major markets, including, but not limited to, LA, San Diego, San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, Denver, New Jersey, Manhattan, Philadelphia. Those were markets that we would send 1 pallet, 2 pallets every once in a while. And really, I lay a lot of that directly, or I credit a lot of that directly to Jen. She was the one with the foresight that we need to start opening these relationships with distributors. Even if once a year they only get 100 cases, someday we're going to be glad we did this. And wouldn't you know it, the pandemic hits and everybody is in this same situation. So thankfully, we had 5+ years of relationships with these distributors already in existence. So the day we called them and said, tell you what, how about instead of 2 pallets, you take an entire trailer load? And they flipped out and they were over the moon at the opportunity. So with that said, those markets then were getting, 26 pallets of 80 cases per pallet. And we were nervous. We had never done something like that before, and who knows how it's going to turn out. But lo and behold, those full trailers would hit the market, and quite often they were sold before the truck even left our brewery. So it was a relief for us knowing that we, of course, had that demand in all of these far-flung cities. So it was a ton of work, of course, but thankfully they were ready for it, and the customers were certainly ready for it. I don't know if you want to delve into a different question here, or if I should just keep prattling on, but I could certainly.
I will say, you came into Connecticut and no one distributes in Connecticut because it's incredibly expensive. So I guess in my head, I was thinking all. So I will rescind that, or I'll explain a little more about. Yeah, it's outrageously expensive to come to Connecticut.
Connecticut was one of the last markets that we started going into.
It always is.
Yeah, and it kind of was, and also Massachusetts was one of the first markets that we pulled back out of once people started traveling again and being able to come up, and we had our curbside established, and you could come to the brewery again and actually purchase the beer on site. As far as quality goes, it's kind of the story begins way before the pandemic. That's for sure. As far as our opinions on quality and how we run our business, I mean, you'd have to go all the way back to our years of operating that pub when we made a conscious decision that we were not going to distribute our beer. We weren't even selling growlers at our pub because you couldn't package a beer in a growler to a quality standard that I was happy with. I was filling myself growlers, of course, and I would take them home. And in those times, I began experimenting with all different things, and purging the growlers was a big one, So all these times I would see breweries filling growlers, they just grab a dry jug out of a box and start filling it up, and the jug's full of oxygen, and you're immediately destroying this beer and then putting a cap on it. And so from day one, that was insane. The idea of taking one of my beers and oxidizing it, putting it in a growler, and then who knows what happens to it between the time that person gets it home, gathers their friends around, and then opens up that growler, and then everyone stands around and talks about how oxidized it is, So we were very adamant that we weren't gonna let our beer get out of our brewery until we were ready to do it the right way.
So can you maybe on that note then, for people who don't know, like what does oxygen do to beer, and what does temperature do to beer, and what does time do to beer?
Oh my gosh.
In Cole's notes version.
The short answer, it absolutely destroys it. Again, I feel like we almost have to go backwards in this conversation, because we're ahead of the root of everything here. So very early on in my brewing career, when I was tasting beers and getting beers from far-flung places, I'm talking about the early 90s, when the idea of refrigerating beer was the least of a beer distributor's concerns. It was, for the most part, everything was warm. It would be the cheap beer that flew off the shelves, the Iron City, stuff like that would be in the cooler maybe to grab a 12-pack. But some of the beers that were early influences on my thinking of all of this, of course, I've got to talk about Sierra Nevada. So Sierra Nevada was, I don't know if they were well known for it, but I was aware of it because beer was my passion. And so when I read that, what they would do is they would do partial bottle conditioning for stabilization of the beer, and to package a live beer that was unpasteurized, not entirely carbonated through natural means, but just enough to mop up any residual dissolved oxygen that might have been picked up during packaging. And it made for a beer that would just age beautifully and just last a little bit better. But they were still sitting out warm on the shelves. So it's a testament to their process, and their idea of how to make their beer withstand some of these harsh conditions that it would be exposed to. So when we started making our beer at the pub, of course, nobody that I know of ever talked about a beer being unpasteurized. So it was essential to me to try to teach people what this means. I had worked in enough breweries that filtered their beer to observe that it really can strip a lot of character out of a beer. And not only does it strip character out of a beer, but it then makes it less, it kills it, for lack of a better term. At that point, the way that beer tastes is the way it's going to taste. That's it. It will go through no further changes in the packaging. That didn't sit well with me, because I would witness the evolution of a flavor of a beer, even in a bright tank, over the course of 4 weeks, maybe, that it would be on tap. And quite often, I would like it the best the days before it kicked, toward the end of this conditioning like this. And so we wanted to be able to reproduce that in a package, which we decided to make cans. And it's interesting that after almost 20 years now, finally, I'm being interviewed on this topic. I really think that The Alchemist was central to a lot of what now is widely accepted as common in the world of craft beer. When we first started packaging Heady Topper, 2011, and we were going to start distributing our beer to a very small market within 25 miles of the brewery, we met with several beer distributors, local and New England beer distributors. Not a single one of them could guarantee full cold chain distribution. So we had to do it ourselves. When nobody else could guarantee, we weren't going to sign with them, and we refused to. So that's when we decided to set up our own distribution company and start doing it on our own. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Just soaking it in.
We're listening. We have
Okay. Maybe every once in a while, just throw up a little message with like a thumbs up. So
Okay.
you got it. You got it.
So not a single distributor could guarantee this for us. And so we had to begin from scratch. And again, this is the genius of my wife. She's the one that put in all of this work and built Alchemy Distributing. So then we set up over and maintained over 200 accounts, all within 25 miles of the brewery. We had our own vehicles. We had our own staff. We distributed. We would take it into the accounts. We would put it into the cooler ourselves. Over those first couple of years, it was an uphill struggle with accounts, trying to educate them as to something they had never had to do before, which was you have a beer that absolutely cannot be allowed to get warm. This is what we insist upon, and this is what we demand that you do if you're going to sell our beer. And some accounts put up a lot of resistance to that. They said, oh, come on. We've never had to do that. We don't have to do that with any of these other beers. And it's like,
I've been selling beer for 10 years. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. It's like, well, you've never sold our beer.
Right.
And, some people were miffed at that, but eventually they came around, and it was an unbelievably daunting task. We started from scratch and educated an entire industry. After setting that standard, there's not a distributor anywhere that the first thing they're going to say to you is, we can offer you full cold chain distribution. That is just a standard thing now. That did not exist before we started insisting upon it, and then doing it ourselves and showing how to do it.
John, does your IPAs, I'm assuming do you have a shelf life with your distributors and they all know that and all your accounts know that? Or do you just, and if you do, what's that number?
It's just not it's not a thing.
Not a thing.
When we date our cans, we date the packaging date.
Okay.
Our beer is gone off of every shelf within days of hitting the market. So it's not as big of an issue for us as it might be for some breweries.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different factors that go into that. Demand is certainly one of them. Our reputation and what people expect and what we deliver, that's part of it. And the size of our operation. We decided a long time ago that we weren't going to be one of those breweries that just kept growing and growing and expanding and getting bigger and bigger. That's just holds zero appeal to Jen and I. We have always been motivated really by two things. The unquestionable quality of our beer and every one of our employees' lifestyle. We didn't ever want to have a business so big that we lost control. We didn't ever want a business so big that we would be forced into full-time distribution in multiple states. This was all for very specific reasons. I mean, those two are big ones, but of course, another really huge one is exposure to liability. The world is a volatile place, and when you get to a certain size, little problems become big problems, and big problems can compound and destroy everything. And we were determined to never let that happen. It took vigilance. It takes I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but basically I think a lot of business owners and brewery owners start seeing all those dollar signs, and they just want more and more and more. And that's just never been a motivating factor for us. We've had absolutely nothing at times in our lives. So to have what we do have is incredible. And we don't need more. We are very aware of more does not make you happier. And we have created the life that we want to live. And why would we change that just because people want more of our beer? It's like, well, too bad. There is no more. This is all there is. So deal with it.
Great. Can I ask, you mentioned when you were working at a prior brewery, you personally enjoyed the beer kind of when the bright was almost empty. What was the change that was going on in the bright that resulted in it being so good at the end? And then how have you captured that in your beer now?
Well, an unfiltered and unpasteurized beer that goes through countless metabolic changes as it sits there and ages. That fine layer of yeast on the bottom of the tank or in the bottom of the can or the bottom of the bottle, it's alive, and it continues to have different influences on the beer that is in the package. This is what makes an aged barley wine develop depth and complexity. This is what makes a rough around the edges, very young, green, aggressive IPA evolve into an elegant and delightful IPA with nuance. This is what creates depth of character in a Doppelbock or a Pilsner or any lager that you're going to lager for 8 to 12 weeks before you're going to release it to the customer. So the benefits of a beer being kept alive are many. And that's what drives us to insist upon all of the standards that we have set with keeping our beer fresh and presenting it to the customer. It is absolutely essential that somebody buys our beer and it's fantastic.
Right.
And
Sure.
I have bought our beer out of gas stations in Vermont. If I see it, I'll buy a 4-pack because I want to check the date. I mean, I'd look like a mental case going through people's coolers in random places, grabbing 4-packs and looking at the dates. And at this point, so a couple of years ago, it was soon after the pandemic started. That's when we finally wrapped up our distribution company and we stopped self-distribution. And the only reason we did that, well, there were a couple of different reasons. For one thing, we basically just broke even on the whole process. So we weren't making any more money by self-distributing. We were just basically it ensured control and the ability to educate. So when we found a local distributor that we had confidence in and understood what we expected and were fully on board, that's when we signed on with Craft Beer Guild. And that is what gave us the ability to then start hitting more than just our little 25-mile radius in Vermont. And then we were able to actually get beyond Burlington and up into the Northeast Kingdom a little bit and down to Brattleboro and these parts of the state that we just were unable to get to before. And what did that, of course, was bringing this second production brewery online. So we doubled our production from 9,000 barrels a year to 18,000 barrels a year. So that all coincided nicely with the stage of the industry, and finally distributors maturing and getting up the speed and doing what needed to be done to ensure the quality of our beer.
I have a question. Is there a date that when you can, and you see it, so like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, when you think that it doesn't have to be your beer, but when you say an IPA tastes its freshest? Because there are a lot of people who are like, I have to drink this the day it was packaged, or no, you have to wait 2 to 3 weeks and then let the beer develop. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I generally ignore anybody that thinks they know. Because that's all bullshit. It really is. It really is your personal taste. I will tell you this. Obviously, not all beer is created equal, and beyond that, to a much larger extent, not everybody's packaging skill is equal. So it is hit or miss. It really is. I would never name names, but I can't tell you how many times I've had beers from very highly regarded breweries, and quite frankly, they're awful. That could be many different things, but some of them I've witnessed myself just by having them in my fridge and trying them over the course of a month. And some of them absolutely fall off a cliff after 2 or 3 weeks. This is a factor of a lot of different things, but the easy thing to peg it on is their packaging. A lot of people think they can buy a canning line or a bottling line, and if you're filling them up and getting seams and they don't leak, hey, great, ship it out the door. But that's preposterous, because if you're not quantifying what you've done to the beer during packaging, you're blind to what is actually happening. So if you just take Heady Topper as an example, we will package Heady Topper when it's about between 21 and 24 days old. In my opinion, the day you package it, I mean, it's great, but it has so much room to get better. It will, any beer, anytime it moves from one vessel to another, it needs time to adapt to its new surroundings. From a conditioning tank to a bright tank to the final package, whether it be a keg or a bottle or a can. Those beers are immediately continuing to develop. And like I mentioned earlier, depending on the style, those changes can be observed in different ways. But as far as an IPA goes, a young, freshly packaged IPA, whether it's packaged or not, it, by its very nature, has a much more aggressive, present hop character that, again, if it was filtered, it would be stagnant, and that is what the character would be. But being unfiltered and unpasteurized, it will change and evolve that little bit. I love our beer when it's young. I'll pull a Heady out of the fridge that's 3 weeks in the can, 5 weeks, 8 weeks. I've had Headies that are 2 years old sitting in the cooler. We will age and try and just see what other people might be experiencing if they age the beer in their fridge. It changes with time, but it is always outstanding and beautiful and bright and fresh. That is a testament to our skill as brewers and our skill as packagers.
Yeah, love that. it's almost like you can embrace the evolution as opposed to trying to pick a perfect time.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of part of it. You need to be thinking, what if this beer sits in the back of someone's fridge for 6 months? What's it going to taste like when they open it? That's why we do that ourselves. So we know what it's going to taste like because we've been doing that for 12, 13 years now. It is the most essential thing. I mean, it's like when I design a beer, whatever flavor I want people to experience when they open that can, you are building it around the most basic flavor, which is the flavor of carbonic acid, which is CO2 dissolved in water. So anybody that's ever drank a glass of club soda can tell you that it does not taste like water. It tastes like carbonic acid. So that at its very basic, you need to design a beer around that flavor. That flavor is unavoidable. What am I going to do with the hops and the malt to make that flavor just meld in with everything else and become part of the whole?
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of brewers think of CO2 as an afterthought. You know, it's the last thing you do, carbonate it up, and it's, you know, I don't think they think about it the way you think about it. So that's
It
great.
adds so much, you know, from
Well,
mouthfeel
huge.
to, yeah,
Huge impact on the final flavor of a beer.
huge.
Can I ask John, you know, you're quite famous that it's printed right on your can, that people should drink it straight from the can. I've heard you explain the reason why, that it creates a little, you know, cap of CO2 within the can that protects the beer. We just talked about how your IPA will evolve over time, whether it's a couple days or a couple of months. What about within the can? Like, you know, assuming it takes me several minutes to drink the can, should I be honing in on flavor changes over that period of time? Is that something that you think about, or should it taste consistent throughout the entire time I'm drinking that one can?
Well, that's one of the big reasons that I want you to drink it out of the can. So if I am sitting at home and I decide to have a beer, generally I'm going to have one beer. And I don't necessarily want to rip right through it. So look, I mean, people love to pour a beer. I love to pour a beer. It looks beautiful. It's fun to drink out of a nice glass. But when I pour my beers into a glass, I'm drinking them. They're not sitting there. I'm not sipping it. I will rarely pour an entire can of beer into one pour in a glass in one shot. Obviously, the moment you do that, that beer is just expelling awesomeness as it sits there. The initial opening of the can and pouring, you push so much character out of that beer, just the action of pouring, that really you are accelerating the degradation of that beer exponentially. And yeah, I get it. It smells great when you first pour it. And, you know, I mean, I've been in situations off property, you know, if I'm trying heady out in the wild. I mean, there are times when a bartender will open that beer and I can smell it when it's 3 feet away. If you put that in the glass, you know, obviously you got a very short window where it's going to really be a true expression of what is in that package. So if I'm only having one beer and I'm sipping it out of the can, that last 3 ounces of beer in that can, it could be 3 hours later that I finish it. It's outstanding. It's going to be room temperature, but it is absolutely delicious.
And delicious in a different way than the first 3 ounces.
Sure. There's just no need to even challenge that fact, because give me a break. You pour that 16 ounces of beer into a pint glass and drink half of it and let it sit for 2 hours, and then you go back to finish it. it's a disgrace. It's a shadow of what it once was. I mean, any beer would be. It's completely inundated with oxygen. It has sat there for 2 hours and off gassed, and it's just oxidized garbage. You drink that last 3 ounces out of a can, and it is the opposite. It is a beautiful, accurate representation of our craft.
Yeah, awesome. I could listen to you talk about beer all day. That's just
Don's
awesome.
so
I'm
happy
thirsty
right now.
I am. I'm thirsty because I actually am drinking carbonated water right now, and I feel sad.
Which
What's wrong? What's wrong?
ironically,
with water?
ironically enough, I cannot stand club soda.
Really?
Ugh.
I love clubs. I love carbonic bite. I love
Yeah,
it.
me too.
I love it. My favorite. I want
Oh.
I want a club soda that like literally will bite you back.
Well, if it's
So-
wrapped with malt and hops, sure, I can get behind that. But otherwise,
Does this mean the Alchemist will never produce a hard seltzer?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
There are a few
breaking
things that
story.
anybody can speak of in life with absolute certainty. I can guarantee you will never see a hard seltzer out of the Alchemist.
Okay.
What I mean, seriously, what's the point? I'm sorry.
Oh,
I get it. A lot of people enjoy it, but for me, it's not. I mean, then you're drinking just to get the buzz. I mean, what real pleasure do you get out of drinking a lemon lime hard seltzer? Maybe it's quenching your thirst and you're getting a buzz, but boy, there's just nothing. There's nothing there. There's no heart. There's no soul. It's just a method of getting an intoxicant into your bloodstream at that point. And then it just kind of takes the fun out of it for me, because then I'm just sitting there like, okay, well, why exactly am I drinking? You know?
I like them when it's like 90 degrees. That's
Mm.
the only time I'll ever like, if I'm like it's really hot, or the beach. But I get why people don't like them.
Sure.
I'm also one of those like let's drink all things equally kind of person. But
Yeah. Not much more of a snob than that. I'm sorry.
that's okay. Everyone's allowed to have their opinion.
And when it's
Totally.
that hot, pretty much the only thing I can do is smoke weed. I kind of lose interest in alcohol as soon as it gets over about 85 degrees.
That's all. And when it's 85, it's all I want is like a really cold beer. It's so
Oh,
good.
that alcohol buzz really starts to just
Yeah,
doesn't
I
jibe with me
only
when
drink
it's
like
hot.
one. Yeah, I drink like a beer. I'm a real lightweight though. I'm like
Sure.
half a beer. I'll share a can with my husband, and then I'm like, oh, I'm good. But yeah. What was I gonna ask? I was gonna ask something. I totally lost my train of thought because we talked about hard seltzer. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's my fault.
See what it
Don.
does? See what it does to your
Yeah,
brain?
exactly.
All right, fair.
Different levels.
Fair. Damn it. I was gonna ask something. Totally forgot.
About
Great.
IPA?
No, I don't remember.
No.
Don, you've got more questions, don't you?
I don't. I just I think John, I really want to thank you because you've been saying a lot of things that I've been thinking, but you have credibility and I don't. So I want to thank you for
Oh, that's not true, Don.
for saying what I was thinking about how beers evolve. Freshness
Absolutely.
is very, very important, but beer is going to evolve, and so embrace that and enjoy it. So,
Before you leave, is there anything that you want to add that we've missed talking about? Is there something freshness wise that you want to make sure people understand when they're buying beer? Do you have any advice actually for people who are buying beer?
Yeah, buyer beware, I guess, would be my advice. Not many people will talk about it unless you're in tight quarters, but the state of craft beer, there's never been more craft beer on earth. But boy, there has never been more substandard lame beer on this earth than there is right now. It's scary. It is extremely difficult for me to find beer in the world that wows me, that is actually a complete beer from beginning to end, and doesn't have some glaring yuck about it. It's at times it makes me, it makes me start second guessing myself, and I start thinking, geez, is it me? But I really don't think it is, because I've always been my own toughest and worst critic. And honestly, I am so, and have always been so eager to find beers that I can wholeheartedly champion and just tell people about. And that is hard to do. That is really hard to do nowadays. It seems like it just gets a little depressing at times. We stay true to what we do. We have no plans on ever growing any more than we currently have. And that's the truth of it. We are just so dedicated and committed to always having the quality that is just beyond people's expectations. That's all we really can do. That's all we can really worry about. It's a weird thing when so many people pour into an industry, and it's an industry that, quite honestly, it's not rocket science. It's a process, and it's a laid out process that has been studied and quantified endlessly over the last 100 years. And the data is there. The knowledge is there. There are just so many people in the business that, quite honestly, just lack the palate that is needed to make great beer. Anybody can make beer, but boy, there are not many that make great beer. I don't know what that predicts for the future of craft beer. I mean, who knows how long a brewery can manage to stay afloat and to continually trick new people into drinking and buying their beer. I don't know how that works. It is a mystery to me, but geez, oh man, it's something that Jen and I talk about quite often. And as we age as a business without growing in production, what we focus on really is everything else involved in running a business. And people have different ideas of what satisfaction their business brings to their lives. For Jen and I, The Alchemist is a vehicle for us to enact social change, to lift people in our community around us, to better our employees' lives, to have a voice in a world where ignorance is now championed, and hate and division is acceptable at an ever increasing rate. A lot of businesses will say, oh, well, we don't want to get political. We don't want to talk about stuff like that. Well, tough shit. Be a human being, take a stand, and speak up. And so when we start getting down about the state of craft beer, if you start, like, I will never get bored making outstanding beer. But the world of craft beer as a whole, when you get together with people and all you talk about is craft beer, it gets really boring really fast. so we end up pulling back from stuff like that. We don't do a ton of festivals. We don't get into the business of patting ourselves on the back and promoting ourselves. We let our actions and our words and the quality of our beer do our speaking for us. So really, those are the things that really get us excited and get us moving in the tough times and in the times where you're just overworked and maybe feeling a little burnout. That's right around when we go and talk to a school, or we'll sit down with an entire middle school worth of kids and talk to them about life choices and career choices and just have an influence on people and try to wake them up as to the reality of the world and to get involved and don't be afraid to speak up, because it's quite often the quiet and the underestimated are the ones that end up getting stepped on, and it's about time for them to let their voices be heard. So there you go, in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Awesome. John, thank you
Cheers
so
to
much
that.
for thank you so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate all your insights.
Well, I appreciate being asked to be on your show, and thank you all so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
Cheers.
So Don, what did you learn? There was a lot going on today.
There was a lot going on there. I liked it. Beer, what I love about beer is that it's very complicated, that
Absolutely.
there's a lot going on, and freshness is it's an ingredient. Freshness is an ingredient, just like malt and water and all that, right? So
yeah.
You?
And beer changes, like a beer, you can have a beer, like John said, like when it leaves the brewery or 2 years down the road. And, if you're making a superior product, a great product, it should hold up, and it should be able to be, as long as it's also, I think, on the onus on the consumer to treat the beer properly. So if you're especially talking about hoppy beers, refrigeration, I like to say, beer is living. It can be a perishable ingredient. So do you want a fresh, crisp salad, or do you want a soggy, like slimy salad? That's from the that's what happens. Yeah. And so you want to make sure you're getting the best beer possible. And there's so many ways that freshness can change a product for better or for worse. And so it's really fascinating to talk to these two people from a brewing perspective and a shop perspective, and be vigilant, and have common sense. Make sure you're getting what the brewer intended, because that's the best way to drink beer.
Yeah, what the brewer intended, exactly.
Absolutely.
One thing that John mentioned that I really want to try now, because I don't think I've ever taken 3 hours to drink an IPA, but he talked about it. So I think I'm going to try that. I think I'm going to open a can and have a sip and take some notes, and maybe come back an hour later and have another sip and take some notes. I'm going to
go see. I know that we get their beer here in Connecticut, so maybe I'll go look for it and give a focal banger the old Kimmich treatment.
Yes, the 3 hour.
The 3 hour drinking session. I don't know. I'll probably drink the whole thing so quickly. It's so delicious. I don't know if I'll be able to contain myself. So visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And again, if you're feeling generous or want to support the show, visit our Patreon, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. If you have any questions for us, please email us at podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting this show and others through advertising. Speaking of advertising, let's have a short word from our sponsor.
Attention all managers and team leaders. Do you want to provide your staff with the best training in the beer industry? Look no further than Beer Savvy Online by the Cicerone Certification Program. In just a few hours, your team will master the fundamentals of excellent beer service, styles, and beer flavor. At the end of the course, your team can earn a globally recognized beer industry credential. And the best part, as a manager, you can monitor your team's learning progress. Set your business apart with a beer savvy staff today. To learn more, visit cicerone.org and click on the group training button. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can get your company or message featured on this show and others produced by All About Beer, please reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com. Thanks again to Cicerone for sponsoring this episode.
Before we go, if you like this podcast, one very easy thing you can do to help us is give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting app. This helps other people find the show. We'd also really appreciate it if you would let your beer-loving friends know about the All About Beer podcast to help us spread the gospel of good beer. So, Don, how can people find you on social media, website, all that good stuff?
I am at the Dawn of Beer on Twitter and Instagram, and people can drop me an email at dawn@thedonofbeer.com. And yourself, Em?
I'm at Pints and Panels across all social media, and my website is pintsandpanels.com. This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.